Welcome to Getting to the Truth in His Heart. I am your host, Rob Lee, and this is on MTR Podcast. My next guest is a writer, educator, youth advocate. Please welcome Albert Phillips Jr. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for the invitation. It's a blessing to be here with you today.
Yes, likewise, it's always an opportunity and always a great opportunity to speak with someone who we have some parallels in our backgrounds. Definitely we're going to talk about that a little bit, but if you will, telephone folks who are uninitiated, undipped about your work. I mean, give us that elevator pitch, because you had an extensive situation now. I was like, I'm reading for a while here, man.
Yeah. Born and raised in Baltimore City, but I'm a writer, educator, youth advocate. I've been working with young people for, I think, the last 8-9 years or so. Since graduating undergrad, I've been working with young people professionally, being, in the classroom as a teacher, as a paraeducator. I even had an administrative position, but also in various nonprofits around the city, working in a workforce development capacity. So, your interviews, your resumes, all of those different things to help our young people to become job ready, quote unquote, I've been supportive with. And then more recently, I self-published my first book about a year ago called Y'all Hiring, a Black Teen's Guide to Navigating Employment, which was just a thrill to create, to mold, to go through all the emotions with in order to create something solid for our young people. So that's just a little bit about who I am.
And thank you for sharing that. I do have another question about the book, but we're going to go back into that. I'm going to stay on course. I'm going to stay on schedule and in order for once in my life. And thank you for sharing that. I think when people get into an environment where they're really describing what their story is, whether it be super broad, very concise, it's still a thing, like, really to share. Because some people are like, I don't know what to share. I just do things. And being able to talk about something that obviously is important to you, being from here and working with the youth here is, you were youth here, the same as I. So being able to kind of get back and work with them, that's a big thing. So I read about some of your career shifts, and it feels like a lot of your professional work in education and the Baltimore school system, shout out, and writing for various publications kind of help prepare you. How important, for what you're doing now, how important is education in your creative process as a writer or as a person working with the youth?
It's extremely important. I mean, it started probably really before I could really put a finger on it. But if I had to think back, like, when it comes to writing, I remember my one of my sixth grade teachers, Miss Wilson, she allowed us to go on poetry.com when we were young and just just give us some time to just create. She just put you on the computer and let you do your thing. And a few years back, because they keep your poems on their website. And so, it was kind of hard to find. I had to dig through the archives, but I was actually able to find a poem that I wrote when I was 12. Yeah. One of them was about my dog, and the other one was about my neighborhood. And at the time, I was living over Sandtown, and I had a very, it was dark, you know what I mean? Just the way that I described what was going on, but it was authentic. It was who I was, and it's what I was experiencing. So I appreciate her for giving us that outlet. Continuing on through high school, I remember I had an English teacher at AP English at Dunbar High School. And one of my teachers was Mr. Kelly. And Mr. Kelly let us, he didn't put us on the computer like Ms. Wilson, but I remember just getting more into words and the beauty of words and stringing together essays and doing critiques of my peers. Just really falling in love with the writing process was a lot of fun for me. And then I was a journalism major at Morgan State, specifically print journalism. So I wrote for our school newspaper, I interned for the radio station. All those experiences, man, just helped me. You spoke of career shift. I may be even about to make another one because I'm thinking about, full-time writing, as well as, I'm looking at an MFA program up at UB, which might position me to become even a college professor. Yeah. So I don't feel like I have a limit. I feel like whatever I'm passionate about, fortunately enough, I have the mindset, I have the bandwidth, I have the family, the ancestors, I have all these things supporting me. So I just got to steer the ship to where I wanted to go.
That's legit. Yeah, I was Morgan alum as well. Well, I am a Morgan alum. So shout out Go Bears and all of that good stuff. I went to City. So, I mean, maybe
my dad went to City.
I was like, maybe there's a little smoke there. We're nobility, knights and all. But yeah, definitely, part of the school system here. And I think that I think it's important to have someone that's just doing well. And I think you keyed in on something that was very important in recognizing that despite what things may have been dark when you were recalling, like, your poetry from when you were 12, it's like, I remember at City, I wrote this short story about something that happened in the projects that was really rough that a kid shouldn't see. I mean, I saw this before 10, you shouldn't see it. And I just remember one of the teachers getting back to me. It's like, oh, this is a really good fiction. I was like, no, that's reality. That happened. Like, right. She was just like, oh, wow, you saw that? I was like, yes. This is some of the things. And it was kind of this notion of, well, but you're so smart, you're talented, you're interested in, arts and writing, creative writing, and all of this. And I was like, yeah, that doesn't negate, that either. These two things this is just me. It's baked in, And I think the key thing that I heard you say that's important is just like recognizing that you have the bandwidth, you have the resources from, as broadly as family, as the ancestors, the whole gamut. And I think that's a reminder, right? Where when people think, oh, I'm not going to go anywhere, I'm just, going to do this, you're a testament to that. I remember doing a project at a high school and they were opening this new recording studio. And they reached out to me. We need someone who has a background in this to be the face of it, because we are trying to cater this to our students to show that people that look like you can do this radio stuff, can be a person that's in charge of this really good program. And I think there's power in that. So tell me more about your experience writing your first book, Y'all Hiring, the Black Teen's Guide to Navigating Employment. And I like the fact that that's a thing that's said, y'all hiring. That's a legit thing.
No, fact. So I think what really made the title stick for me, because at first it was just going to be called The Black Teen's Guide to Navigating Employment. But I remember I was over at Mondawmin Mall one day. And I was grabbing some cookies from a great cookie.
As you should.
This was probably like right day on. You already know what kind I got.
Get the snickerdoodles, right?
You already know. So I was there, and I remember one of a student from Douglas, which is right across the street, walked in. Yeah. And was like, "Yo, y'all hiring?" And I don't even remember what the response was from the staff there, but it just kind of sunk into my mind, like, yeah, like this is the title right here. It's Y'all Hiring.
Yeah.
Like it's for the culture, like it's for our people. People will know exactly what it means when I make that the title. So that was the thought behind that. But the real process of putting the book together, I found kind of on the back end that I broke all the traditional rules of putting out a book. What I mean by that is, like, typically people have like these simplistic sort of, I also feel like right now we at a time where like you can break all the rules. It's fine. Yeah. As long as you have a plan, it's important, but like you don't have to follow what everybody else is doing. But usually when people put out books, from what I'm seeing, especially when people have like are part of a major publisher or even a smaller one, they'll do like a hardcover and the audio book, and then they'll come back with the paper book. Mm-hmm. The ebook is also part of that as well. And they'll have like a bunch of places booked to, do like a book tour, whether it's in person or virtual. And then they'll also have, it available in a bunch of stores and online and all these different things. And they typically have different people working on different parts. Like, so when you're working with a publishing company, you have a machine behind you, sort of like an artist working with a record label. Yeah. Which are pros and cons to that. I think, if in my capacity, I was fine being self-published and not going through a traditional publisher. But if I'm Jay-Z, like I'm probably gonna go to a company or even start my own to be able to put my book out. But the process was sort of like that writing process, the same process that I've taught the students for years. We started off brainstorming. I literally was thinking of ideas. I knew I wanted to be an author and I wanted to put out a book. Y'all Hiring actually wasn't the first book I wanted to put out, but I felt like it would be the one that's easier for people to resonate with. Mm-hmm. And it's something that was connected to the current work that I was doing and that I still continue to do right now. And so I was like, this is going to be the one that I put out. And so I had to hire, after I brainstormed and came up with chapters and thought about content, I hired an editor to help edit the book and really provide an editorial assessment, which is really foundational when you're creating a book of before you dive all the way in and you ready to put it out, you need to have someone look deeply into your work to make sure that it makes sense, that it's organized, that it's going to resonate with your audience. They push you in different ways. And you can push back as well if you feel like, nah, I'm really going to keep this. So I went through that process. I hired someone to do my website. I hired someone to do the interior design for the book. On the outside of the book, I hired a graphic designer to do that. So there's a lot of different people involved in this process, but I think it all resulted in a great piece of work.
It's great to hear and great to get a peek inside what that process looks like, because you talk to people who've written books, it's like, oh, yeah, I just started putting things together and then it came out. It's like, no. I need a little bit more to that.
I always thought about impact. Yeah. I didn't want to just create something just to be like, oh, I wrote a book. But anything that I put out at this point in my life is going to have a deeper impact, a deeper meaning. It's going to tell a story. So all that was going through my mind. So, and also the school that you reminded me, because I always forget it. So the school I did that project with was actually Douglas. So okay. It was just like, yeah, coming over to West Baltimore. And I think it was just kind of this reclamation after the weirdness and the unrest and all, because that became one of the centers of it. And it's like, look, we're going to invest here and we're going to, give these kids something to do. And this creative space, we want to invest in that area. So, yeah. So I think most of the commentary about Baltimore youth only scratches the surface, right? There's really minimal discourse, much like when it comes to discussing Baltimore by and large. And I feel like most of what's being said is just negative, hard stop. It's nothing like, oh, well, this is maybe the reason and so on. And you went through, the school system here just like me. You went to Morgan just like me. And I would get the whole, but you're one of the good ones, in comparison to my peers or so on. And almost like I'm an exception to what's expected here. Is that something that you would hear a lot and when you were younger? And kind of give me that truth about Baltimore, because I think it's really interesting to speak to someone who's deeply embedded in Baltimore for the people who are listening, because I think it's a lot of misinformation out there. Yeah, I think a lot of that rings true. Unfortunately, I think people see you, if you have a college degree, especially from Baltimore, if you have a college degree, if you're not locked up, if you alive to some degree, then you have made it, quote unquote. But I don't subscribe to that. I'm a connection of, the people that are here, especially people that look like me. So, if we all ain't free, ain't none of us free. Right. That's kind of the mindset that I have. And I think Martin Luther King said an injustice in one place. I'm chopping this quote already up. My bad, Dr. King. But injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Something like that. And excuse the fire truck going down the street or something that you might read.
Are we keeping it real though?
For sure. But yeah, so I don't see myself as the talent and tiff that W.B. Du Bois talked about. I see myself as an extension of my people, and I'm still trying to figure out a lot of what's going on and to make an impact, to make a difference in my community. That's just how I've been groomed. Yeah. I never was groomed to be an individual, to feel like, I made it, everybody else need to catch up, anything like that. So, but speaking of Morgan State. I remember being there, and I was seeing one of my advisors at the time, and my grades was on point. You know what I mean? I had I think I had at least, I graduated with a 3.9, but I think at that time I might have had like a 3.8, something like that, on point. But I went into his office, and he was like, "Oh," he saw my tattoos. I got tattoos on my arms. And he was like, "Oh, I guess these tattoos don't mean nothing, man. You got pretty good grades." And he thought that was like a compliment. Right. And I was like, "What?" I said, "Nah, bro. Like, they actually mean a lot to me. Like, they significant."
Yeah.
And I don't know why he would think. Well, I know why he would think, but it's unfortunate that people see you and they immediately create this stereotype of what's acceptable and what's not acceptable, and what certain things mean about you, without really knowing you, and I think that creates a disconnect. So, growing up in the city is, it was rough. It still is rough at sometimes. I still live in the city. But it's beautiful to know that I have a village of people, kind of like I said earlier, who support me, who I support them. Baltimore is one of those places where, like, people want to know who you connected to, what side of the city you from. Yeah. You already know, people ask, like, "Yo, what high school you went to?"
Yeah, we already kind of did that, by the way.
Right, just organically, you know what I'm saying? But that's something that's unique, especially to here, because I've been to other cities and they don't have those type of conversations, or at least it's not as important as it is here. Mm-hmm. And we're communal people, you know what I mean? If we rock with you, we rock with you. If we don't, we don't. Yeah. And that's just how it is. So a lot of challenges, a lot of turmoil, a lot of beef that I think we got to really get through and solve. But, I'm happy to say that I'm a part of that. I'm a part of trying to be a part of the solution.
Yeah. And like, I kind of have grown into echoing that sentiment where, kind of recognizing I was doing a lot of stuff that was just just doing this creative pursuit, right? Of just doing my own thing, not really being within the community, kind of like not shying away from being in the community, but not being very deliberate about saying I'm in the community, right? So, in doing this and what it takes to do it, it's literally a love letter to Baltimore and connecting the different communities here, having that crossover, that wiring, that we're all from the same place. We're all kind of trying to pursue the same thing. We know most of the same people. Baltimore is not that big. And it's one of those kind of reminders. And, I think one of the things that I learned from it is how, despite it not being that big, how isolated we are sometimes. Like, I'm over east. That's it. I don't leave, and
I mean, it's very much isolated. Yeah. It's isolated by zip codes, yes. By blocks, even sometimes. I think D. Watkins put out a piece years ago called Two Baltimores, because it's just vastly separated. You go to Roland Park, you go to Canton, it's much different from down the hill or Sandtown or Penn North. These communities are flourishing. So much so, I read a report a few years ago that, like, the life expectancy of certain people changes depending on what zip code you live in.
That's legit.
Right? So you have people who live in one zip code who are living on average 10 to 15 years less than people who live in another part of the city, right? And so we know that there's a lot of work to be done there around that.
And I mean, the thing that really gets me, especially when people kind of come in and they will move in, like I think of Hopkins almost immediately in that area. It's just like, you can walk 2 blocks and you're like, oh, it's sketchy here. It's like, yeah, but you literally just came from over there. Or even where I'm at, I'm in like, East Baltimore in the 21213 area. I can go up the street and I'm in 05 and it's just like, oh, we have hospitals and education over here. It's like,
yeah,
like what is it? It's the same. Yeah. It's literally the same area. And it's like these imaginary lines. So speak on returning to the school system, like speak on what that experience was like and kind of what did you like learn from returning, like to being someone that was a student within the school system and coming back and being on the other side of that exchange as an educator?
I think the number one thing I learned was that Black men are needed severely in our school systems, not just in Baltimore, but throughout the country. Um, students deserve our experience. They deserve our intellect, our style of teaching. All of that is needed within an educational system because it's largely run by white women who, some great teachers in the school system, but our presence is needed, first and foremost. And I realized that my first year of teaching, for the most part, because it's so funny. I tell people all the time, like when I first started teaching, I think it took a while for my students to realize, like, yo, I'm a real teacher. Like, I'm not a substitute. I'm not the person you get sent to, like, when you do something bad. Like, I'm really a teacher, because they had never had, like, a Black man as their teacher before. And so it was hard for them to kind of grapple with that. If you layer that with, they pops might not be at home, or they might not have, a strong Black, role model in their life, I kind of put like more of a burden on me. I felt like it was heavy, and it pushed me and challenged me in a way to show up to the best of my ability, which was not always easy. Our students deal with all types of trauma, learning difficulties, just general disinterest. I had one student, he was drinking a Monster Energy drink at like 7 a.m. I'm like, bro, like, you just woke up. Like, why are you drinking
you're like, yo,
why are you always drinking an energy drink? Like, you went to sleep and you just woke up. So it's just like, but you got to deal with all of that, and you got to find ways to resonate with students. So our presence is important. I also realize how much like we get pushed out. And sometimes it's like, physically, in a way where we feel like we get pushed out of the school, but our voices and our perspectives get pushed out as like not being valid and not being essential to the educational environment. And, that's something that I felt to some degree, along with my peers, in some more severe cases, literally like resigning because they felt like, yo, y'all don't even respect me here. Like, y'all don't even, I'm telling y'all what I think we should do, but you don't even care about my opinion. So there are a bunch of initiatives now to try to get more Black men into education. So it's a lot. I mean, I'm still learning a lot. I work full time for city schools, not in a classroom, but in a district office down at North Avenue. And, some great work happening there. But I don't necessarily agree with, every decision that everybody makes in every office. But that's not, that's just something that I think is the case probably wherever people work.
No.
You be doing some great work, and then, other things come and you don't necessarily agree with it.
I work in like higher ed, right? And I kind of would hear that thing, yeah, we need you brothers here. And it's like always this weird, it's a necessity, but I think it's more so speaking on the lack of that visibility, or that lack of black men there in that environment. And I just remember, this is not necessarily connected with like grade school and such, or the school system, but it is a school in Baltimore. And I just remember being in an environment where it was just the 4 Black guys in the office. We were all the data folk, but we were all in the same area. It's like they pinned us around. They didn't want us to kind of spread out and be within the office. It's like going back to that notion of we're broken off, and these would be conversations we would have of like, you see this, right? You see this happening, right? But at the same time, it's like the talents were needed, but not the bodies, as it were. So kind of maybe shifting gears, but using that as a means to shift gears more concretely, because I think you've touched on it, you've poked at it on numerous times in this conversation. How does your work really comment on the current social or political issues, like specifically in Baltimore or more broader?
Yeah, so in a lot of ways, one, youth unemployment is huge. It's huge from a few different vantage points, like especially when you think about COVID. A lot of young people who work, especially like teenagers, they work during summer months, where they're out of school, or they work like in the spring. but mostly during the summer months. And so employers not being able to hire and closing down, during a pandemic, like drastically impacted their, ability to build their professional capacity by having a job, right? Having a stable income to learn skills, to network. And in some ways even impacted their families, right? Their families were dependent on that student making that money and bringing it home. And so it literally took money out of the household. Yeah. And so, my book speaks to not just helping Black teens get a job, but how do you thrive? How do you take best advantage of your position at a job? Because, we know that our jobs will take full advantage of us and will burn us out and then leave you out to dry. Yeah. But how do we take advantage of scholarships that our jobs might provide or opportunities to advance? How do we network? How do we deal with stress? The book, I think, is also very unique because, we live in a time where racism, white supremacy continues to thrive throughout this country and throughout the world. And so the book even touches on how do you deal with workplace discrimination? Mm-hmm. How do you deal with hiring discrimination, which are critical? And I was even reading a report from like 30 or 40 years ago. And I think it was in either New Jersey. I can't remember the state. I have the book somewhere around here. But it was talking about how discrimination in the workplace was a huge reason, and it continues to be a huge reason why, people resign or are fired from different places of employment. So I wanted to really create a resource that allowed our young people to be advocates for themselves. Mm-hmm. A lot of material and content around workforce development is like, just put your suit and tie on, learn how to interview, get your resume. That's it. Right. And I felt like our young people needed a lot more. And so I try to provide more of that. And I did it in a way that actually told some of my employment journey. So while reading it, you're not just like learning about these tips and tricks and ideas, but you're learning about my experiences, things that I did absolutely wrong, lessons I've learned, communities I've lived in, connections I've made. So it's very revealing in that way. But, I think the book is definitely a tool, and a resource for young people. It's not like the end all be all, like, you read Albert's book, you'll never have to worry about anything because you got it all figured out. But I think, just being able to jump in where you feel like is the best and most appropriate part of it can definitely lead our young people to some greater support.
It's a resource. I like how you touched on that. It's more than just get yourself ready. Take these, work on look in the mirror, put on a tie. This is how you tie. It's like, what's the real thing? What's the real thing that,
man, I was just reading, and I put this in a book as well. Harvard released a study and they talked about people of Asian descent, mm-hmm. African descent, even African Americans as well. And how people they quote unquote whiten their name on their resume in order to increase their likelihood of getting an interview or callback. Yeah. And so you'll have someone, Olufema, right? Some African name that has a lot of reverence, a lot of power, yeah. More meaning than like an Albert. But they would change their name to James in order to get an interview, yeah. For a job. And I think that that's disheartening, right? Like that shows, where our world is, where people can't even show up as who they truly are. And I've even met people. I remember I love African food. Mm-hmm. So I go to like Nigerian spots and Ethiopian spots, different places around the city. And I remember one place in particular, I frequent there pretty often, so they knew my face. So I'm like, let me just introduce myself because I'm like, I see you all the time. And I can't remember what she told me her name was. It probably was like Samantha or Sally. I'm like, you was from Ethiopia. That is not your name.
Absolutely not.
That is not. It ain't no Sally's walking around Ethiopia. So
you need more syllables.
But she just felt like that was the more appropriate name to share, right? Mm-hmm. So, in the book, it's like, how do you deal with stuff like that? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. So let's see. Last question I have before I get into rapid fire questions, and rapid fire questions are always fun. So I read that a lot of your work is geared towards helping the youth. So think back when, and obviously from what you were saying, it's, in that space as well, especially your book. Think back to your childhood. What did you hope to be as an adult? Like, are you in that space now, or is it like, look, I was trying to be an astronaut and a football player? Like, what does that look like for you?
I think every black kid from my hood probably wanted to be a football player. In fact, one of my, how you do those school photos, like Life Touch, I had a football in one of them, you know what I'm saying? So I think,
okay,
I tell kids, like, you can do that. It's a small likelihood that you're going to make it there, but if that's what you want to dream of, I'm not going to shoot you down, but I definitely want you to consider something else for sure.
Right. Even
above that, in my opinion. But I wanted to be a pediatrician. Oh. And I remember in 3rd and 4th grade, I think my teacher, Miss Milam at William Penderhughes, she I don't know, maybe she didn't have nothing for us to do that day. She asked us to draw like what we wanted to be. Mm-hmm. And I remember trying to draw a pediatrician. I don't know why it was so like fascinating to me. But that's what I wanted to be probably, I don't know, up until like maybe middle school. Mm-hmm. And then it shifted to just like something writing related, which I think I resonate more with now.
And I think even looking back to, when you were saying earlier about your, about some of the early poetry, like you were 12, that's those middle school years. So it's like, yeah, I'm more into this. You'd be that one poetic like pediatrician. It's like, look, man, I just need to know what this kid needs. So that's pretty much, and thank you for sharing all of this. That's pretty much all I had in terms of questions before we get to some rapid fire questions. So let me regale you what rapid fire questions are for this podcast. What's shaking my constituency? Rob Lee here, and I want to tell you about something sweet. No, not just my sweet voice, and you'll get back to the podcast in a moment, but I want to tell you about one of my presenting sponsors for this month, Waffy Waffle. Do you like dessert? I hope you do. Do you like over-the-top dessert waffles? Well, Waffy is right up your alley. Waffy has yeast-based waffles made with love and topped with everything from syrup to sprinkles, the regular stuff, to ice cream and even cheesecake toppings. Treat yourself to something sweet today. Visit Waffy at www.waffywaffle.com and on Instagram at Waffy Waffle. And don't forget to tell them that Rob Lee sent you. I'll ask you a question and the answer is what the answer is. You don't have to provide any additional context unless you want to. So it's essentially like, it is what it is. I said what I said. So if I ask you like, what's your favorite movie? It's just like, that's my favorite movie. I don't need to explain it. All right. So what's something that every black teen should know that's not in the textbook?
You are exactly what your ancestors prayed and sacrificed for.
See, I'm asking the right person this right question. I was looking for an answer like that. Favorite book?
Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe.
Favorite subject? You can frame this either maybe something that you were kind of teaching or maybe what you were learning. What is your favorite subject?
Definitely like English or social studies, maybe both.
Hidden talent?
I used to rap back in the day, so I probably still got some bars up in me somewhere.
I was waiting for that. See, we have a parallel thing going on here. Last one, and I think you touched on it, but maybe you didn't. What was your first job?
So my first job, and I talk about this in the book, my first job where I actually get a paycheck was youth works. I work as a counselor at Holland Park Recreation Center. So
everything is gearing you towards that spot where you're doing your work. You're helping out the folks. You're a counselor. You're just everything you're doing. It's just pointing in the right direction. The universe has directed you in that right space. So I'm just happy to hear more about you and the work that you're doing. And just it's a privilege to talk to you. So what I like to do at this point is I'm out of questions because I'm a slacker, but I want to leave the floor up to you to plug away. Where can they find you at on social media? Where can they get the book? Things of that nature.
Yeah, for sure. Find me on Instagram at The Ambitious Black Guy, at The Ambitious Black Guy on IG. Go to my website, albertphillipsjr.com, to learn more about me as a person. And if you're interested in the book, Y'all Hiring, a Black Teen's Guide to Navigating Employment, I made it real simple for you. You can go to y'allhiring.com.
So there you have it, folks. I want to thank you again for being on the podcast. And I'm going to wrap up. So for Albert Phillips Jr., I am Rob Lee, saying that there is just youth advocacy, just people doing good work in and around Baltimore. Yeah, look for them.